Hey everybody, it's Audrey from Audrey Approved. Welcome or welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about graphic novels. So as a kid, I was never a huge fan of comics or even like the cartoons in the Sunday newspaper. And so it's kind of taken me a bit by surprise just how much I like graphic novels. And ever since I picked up my first one, maybe a year or a year and a half ago, I've read a lot of them, maybe 50 or 60 different series or standalones. And so today I want to do a bit of a wrap up for some of the ones that have stood out to me for either good or bad reasons. Now, when I first started reading graphic novels, I thought that, they would all be very plot-driven stories just because of the medium, it being a visual medium, and not having the ability to have like introspection or a lot of character development. But, there are some graphic novels that prove me wrong, that do manage to have quite a bit of depth, although I still think that the best stories for graphic novels are ones that lend them well to new settings or new visuals simply because of the format and of the medium. And so my goal today is to do rapid reviews. I know I'm not the most I'm maybe succinct in my book reviews, but I'm going to try to be a little bit quicker in my reviews today. And I want to flash them up. I want to show, in some cases, an example of some of the art, although I'll make sure that it comes from earlier in the first volume, so no spoilers for any of these stories. And I just want to put them on your radar so you know they exist. Graphic novels are low time commitment because they're usually pretty quick, and so if any of these grab your eye, I hope you go out on a limb and check them out from your local library or from your local shop and see if you like them. So I'm going to organize this by genre, and so you can use the timestamps to help navigate back and forth between genres that you find more interesting than others. The first genre I want to talk about is sci-fi, and I have quite a few picks for this genre. One of the first graphic novels I ever picked up was Saga, and it's a great place to start if you've never read a graphic novel before. This is about an intergalactic conflict, kind of similar to Star Wars maybe, but with a lot more emphasis on family, as the main characters are two people from opposite sides of this galactic divide, and they raise their young mixed-race child. There's lots of adventure, there's lots of different planets and different species and different issues that pop up. It's also just a huge story. There's a ton of content. I think there's over 1,000 pages of this graphic novel that you can binge if you so desire. Next up, we have Sentient, which is a single volume graphic novel set on a spaceship where there's been some sort of attack and all of the adults on this spaceship have died, leaving the children. Now, I don't really like the art in this graphic novel. I was actually kind of disappointed when I started reading it. But where this graphic novel does do really well is with the dimensionality of its characters. Considering how short it is and that all of the characters are children, I really thought that there was a lot of depth here, and it's made me a really big fan of this writer and artist. Black Science is a series that I need to actually catch up on now that I make this video. It's about a group of scientists that have some sort of issue and they end up doing all of this galactic space and time travel. So like Saga or Star Wars, there's a lot of different planets and different species. My favorite part about it is just how creative the writers and the artists can get with all of these new different settings. It's a lot of fun. I prefer Saga over this, but I gotta get back into this series. Invisible Kingdom is a 3-volume sci-fi series that I'd say is part space trucker, part space nun, part intergalactic Amazon corporation, and all of that is wrapped in a queer love story. Now this has some really cool art. It's really bright and colorful with the color palette that the artist has chosen. But I found some of the space scenes kind of confusing, especially all of the space flights. I stopped after finishing the second volume on this because I couldn't get that invested in the characters, but if it sounds interesting, you should check it out. Low is a graphic novel that has a really interesting kind of concept behind it. The idea is that radiation has forced Earth's civilizations down underneath the ocean into these kind of underwater cities. And I was really hoping for like adult Atlantis. And I think like the water scenes and the art style in this are really beautiful. The problem with Low is that none of the women wear any clothing. And just the heavy-handed male gaze in this graphic novel really turned me off, and I did not continue after the first volume. And then lastly for this category, we have Brzrkr by Keanu Reeves. And the author is why I picked this book up, because I was really interested in what Keanu Reeves would come out with in a graphic novel. It's about an immortal warrior who looks very similar to Keanu Reeves, and he can't die. I didn't continue with this as well because this is the most bloody and violent graphic novel that I've ever read, and I just wasn't into it. When it comes to fantasy, one of the first graphic novels that I think of is Monstress. And this is a maybe 6 or 7 volume, still in progress graphic novel that I really want to give 5 stars to. But I just can't because it's such a confusing story. This is described as steampunk meets 1900s Asia, and I don't get that vibe at all. For me, this is a dark medieval-ish fantasy set in a world where gods and humans interact. It's a queer story filled with a lot of magic, and the art is just absolutely gorgeous. The color palette is really dark, and it gives it such atmospheric vibes. I know there's a new volume that's come out for Monstress that I've been meaning to get to, but I know because the storyline's so confusing that I'll probably have to reread, all the other volumes before I pick that one up, so I've been avoiding it, but this is one to check out simply for the art. Nimona is a booktube favorite and super adorable. This is maybe the only YA book on this video. It's about an unlikely pairing. It's a shapeshifter that's a kind of a moody teenager, and her companion who is this villain who maybe isn't so much of a villain. It's really cute, it's really heartwarming, and it has a lot of those cozy fantasy vibes that have been really popular lately. The Forgotten Blade is a single volume completed, well obviously it's completed because it's a single volume, story set in a medieval, fantasy world where a small group of religious leaders have taken full control over the city. I really liked the art style on this, and the color palette in particular gave it this kind of historical and mythic kind of vibe to the work. If you are in the mood for kind of a traditional chosen one fantasy, then this might be one for you. Coda is my favorite graphic novel to date. This is a 3-volume completed series that has major Mad Max and The Croods vibes, if you've watched either of those videos. The art on this is just my absolute favorite because it's so colorful, it's so detailed, it's so chaotic, and I read a lot of my graphic novels on an iPad, and I just loved zooming in on all of the details in these pages. This is a story that pulled me in and continued to surprise me over and over again. It's set in an apocalyptic world where magic used to exist, but it doesn't anymore. But it's also a story of a relationship, of a found family, and it's just a total romp. I absolutely love this series. Step by Bloody Step is by the same writer and artist duo as Coda, so I was super excited to pick up Step by Bloody Step. It was one of my most anticipated releases last year when it came out. Now this is a super ambitious project because this is a graphic novel that has no words. There are, texts and text bubbles, but they're written in this made-up language. And so the reader, has to be able to follow along based on just the visuals. And I give major props to the authors to even attempt this, but the problem with an approach like that is that you have to execute it perfectly for it to be successful. And unfortunately, I kind of got lost in the last maybe third or a quarter of this book, and I got pretty confused and I just couldn't figure out what was happening. So I'll continue to consume anything that, this writer-artist duo come out with in the future, but this one was a pass for me. You should definitely check out Coda instead. Daryl Open World was advertised as steampunk Harry Potter. I got this one on NetGalley and I immediately requested hearing that description. But I think this is based on a novel. It's based on a popular YA novel in Europe. And without having read that novel, I found this pretty confusing because a lot of the storyline implies that you've already read and are familiar with this world. So this was a bit of a pass for me, and I didn't continue with it. And then Zoc. Zoc is for all of the Studio Ghibli fans. It has major Hayao Miyazaki vibes with both the storyline and the coloring. This is the story of a girl who can collect water in her hair, and she's a bit of an outcast in her community, so she's on a search for purpose and friendship. This is a really short piece. You can get through it in probably less than an hour, and it was really cute and really heartwarming. The only retelling that I want to mention is Moby Dick. This is a black and white graphic novel that closely follows the story and the pacing of the original Moby Dick. And I found the black and white choice really compelling because it's very dramatic. I thought this was a really atmospheric read, and many of the panels don't even have a lot of text. The author just relies on the visual effects, and I think it worked in this case. I'm unsure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Gelia is for all of the people who watched Cartoon Network as a kid. A lot of those 90s cartoons have a very distinct art style, and this uses that type of art style. This is a story inspired by West African folklore, and a lot of the themes in this graphic novel focus on the idea and the role of storytelling in society. This was kind of a random find for me, and I was really blown away by just the art style and I guess the storytelling of the actual piece. I really enjoyed this one, and I totally recommend it. The Many Deaths of Lila Starr made my best of series for last year. It's a contemporary piece, well, it's I guess magical realism meets contemporary Mumbai, that walks the fine line between living and dying. The premise is that humanity is about to come across the secrets of immortality, and so the avatar of death is thrown down to the world, to, contemporary Mumbai, where she has to live and exist as a normal human being. I thought this was a fresh plot with really excellent pacing and super unique perspectives. One of the sections in this story is from the point of view of a cigarette, which was so unexpected, but I found totally worked. This is absolutely worth checking out. I really, really enjoyed The Many Deaths of Lila Starr. And then lastly, we have Punderworld, which is a retelling of Hades and Persephone. And, that's a Greek myth that gets retold a lot. I know there's another graphic novel, I think, called Lore Olympus that is about, the same relationship. My problem with Punderworld is just my problem in general with a romantic retelling of Hades and Persephone. To me, that is a myth about an abduction, and so yeah, I'm just not a fan of this romanticized way of telling this story. There's actually a really good video essay that Jean from Jean's Bookish Thoughts put out a little while ago. It's a really long video essay, but it was really good. She's a classicist by training. And she actually talks about this very idea where, Hades and Persephone is not the love story that we all imagine. If that's your jam, that's your jam. It just wasn't my jam. So this was a pass for me, and I didn't continue with the second volume. Now, memoirs are where I think graphic novels prove to me that they can have just a ton of depth. So one of the first memoir graphic novels I picked up was Fun Home. And this is the same author who's, if you ever heard of the word or the phrase, the Bechdel test, which is the concept that in movies or film or books, if you can have two characters that are female that talk to each other that don't talk about a man, then that piece of art or film passes the Bechdel test. This is the same author as that concept. This is her personal memoir of her kind of fraught relationship with her father and her own experiences being queer. She explores a lot of these ideas through literature, and I hadn't actually read quite a few of the books that she talks about in this graphic novel, but I still thought this was a really great read and a very emotional one. Black Water Lilies is a contemporary graphic novel set in the same small French village that Claude Monet lived and painted his very famous water lilies. This is definitely reflected in the art, which has strong impressionist vibes and that same sort of kind of watercolor color palette. This is a mystery about a murder that takes place within the village, and it surprised me how much it kept me on my toes. I did not see the ending coming in this. I thought it was really fun and, you know, a great ode to that very famous painter. And then lastly, we have Underwater Welder, which is set in Nova Scotia. I was hoping this one would have maybe a little bit more on the underwater scenes kind of aspect, but this is really a story, a terrestrial story about a man who is about to become a father and a lot of the pressures and anxieties he feels about that upcoming responsibility. It was good, but it wasn't my favorite. And that's 20 graphic novels. I hope you guys enjoyed. If I had to pick 3, I would probably pick Saga, Coda, and The Many Deaths of Lila Starr as being my top 3 graphic novels to check out if you've never heard of them or if you've never picked up a graphic novel before. But yeah, I'd love to know what your favorites are. Graphic novels are so quick to get through, right? It's like an hour or 2 in the morning as you drink your coffee in bed or something like that. So let me know what your favorites are and I'll try to get to them. But I hope you enjoyed and I'll see you next time. Bye.